soon. Well, that's about something. I'll just move around some, so. It's pretty good. Earl, thank you. This is now, okay. Maybe a different spot. Yeah, no, it wasn't you. But it's for August, I'm coming July 23rd. So I should have told Sharon that. Yeah. See if it's still coming out, so we'll send.
Okay, Fevra. Good morning, everybody. So what were we looking at yesterday? We were talking about Takanas Hashavim, and he's providing us with a little bit of background in this footnote. The source of this whole idea of Takanas Hashavim, which essentially is an accommodation for Ganovim or Gazlanim, who steal chattel and then install it such that it becomes a huge expense in order to be able to give it back. So they allowed you to pay cash instead. So what's the source of this halacha? Isa b'mishnah sham heyed Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgeda al Meresh hagozel shebina'o bedira. Hagazel, I think it's a typo. That if a beam is stolen and you build it into a structure, she'itol isdama mipnei takanas hashavim, that you only have to pay the cash because of this concept called takanas hashavim. So first he cites the source for this, and the question is what mechanism is being employed by the sages to allow such a thing when the Torah seems to say otherwise. In other words, how can the rabbis countermand a biblical commandment? So the Meiri, he quotes the Meiri over here in Maseches Sukkah. He says, Hatam l'takonas hashavim. He says, what's the reason for it? Mishum hefker based in hefker. It's because the Beis Din has the jurisdiction, and we've seen this svara before. They can declare any property to be ownerless. The rabbis have that jurisdiction. They can manipulate ownership of property. And the question is, how does that work? So the general assumption is because when a person lives within a Jewish community, he submits to the authority of the Beis Din de facto. So it's a very foreign concept to us. Like, you live in Thornhill. Does that mean that the rabbinate of Thornhill can take possession of your property or declare your property to be hefker? It doesn't. You never bargained for that when you moved in, right? But that seems to be the institution that is working, that is at play here. And this institution has other applications as well. But in any event, that's the mechanism whereby they can say the Gazlan doesn't have to pay back the actual beam, he can just pay cash instead. So the next part that he deals with is how large does the structure have to be? So it doesn't really make a difference. And then he says in the next piece, he says, Tshuvas Anshe Ninveh, the tshuva of the people of Ninveh. Od yesh la'ayin mehagemara tainis, huva shamal Anshe Ninveh, v'darshinan sham b'shem Shmuel ala pasuk vayoshuvu ish midarkam hara'a umin hachamas. That we know the story in Yonah, that after Yonah came to them, they all did tshuva. And the pasuk explicitly says that they did tshuva for the ill-gotten gains that were in their possession, from the Hamas, from the violence that was in their hands. Afilu gazal meireshu beno bibira mikakea kol abira kula umachzer meiresh leba'olav yuyin sham. And the Gemara says that even if they had built structures with stolen beams, they would demolish the entire structures to return the beams. Upirish Rashi sham bira migdal. Okay. And so he goes into a little bit of detail, but he basically says that because they were B'nai Noach, because they were not Jewish, they were liable for a higher standard And the general rule is that when a Gentile steals, he's put to death. The death penalty is for stealing in Noahide law, whereas it's restitution in Jewish law. So v'im kain lefi Rashi aliba d'shmol anshe ninvei asu lifnim mishuras adin. He says, and therefore, one opinion would be that they acted above and beyond the letter of the law by returning the beam and demolishing the structure. But according to another opinion, it doesn't seem that way. They were doing the very minimum that they could do, because this whole accommodation of Takanas Hashavim did not apply to a non-Jew. So that, yeah,
All the North laws that penalty that.
yeah.
Where do we see that?
There are 7 Noahide laws, and but every violation of a Noahide law results in the death penalty. The Rambam writes that in Hilchos Malachim. Yeah.
How is that enforced? How was it ever enforced?
It would only be enforceable when the Jewish people, if let's say a Gentile lives within the borders of Eretz Yisrael, and he submits himself to the authority of the government, because that would be the only time to enact that. However, you should know that it's not just that. Let's say a righteous king among the Gentiles says, I want to live by Noahide law. That would be his obligation. It's interesting that there's a machlokes, the Rambam and the Ramban, in the story of Dinah, who was raped by Shechem. And the question is, what right did Shimon and Levi have to massacre the entire clan of Shechemites, So one of them says it was because they did not enforce Noahide law. Shechem was chayiv misa, he was liable for the death penalty. And so the fact that the people just sat by and did not put him to death for committing a sexual crime like that meant that they were all liable for the death penalty. So anyway, so it's a longer discussion, but that's the rule. But in any event, because of that, there's some discussion as to whether or not a Gentile would even have to return the stolen item. But certainly if he's not, whoops, what happened? I clicked on something by accident. But certainly if he's not put to death, he at least for sure has to return the item. And Takonas Hashavim may not even apply to him. Now, he says, Umidivrei ha'me'iri sham b'tainis, mashma shetakonas meresh nemer gamkein begezel hagoy. He says the Meiri seems to imply that it makes no difference halachically whether you steal from a Jew or steal from a non-Jew. He says, "Kolomar shalohaya poter atzmo b'damim ichshash chamas va'al haderech sha'amru chamsan yahiv demei afal pishem b'takonas chachamim nemar v'chgon zeli poter b'damim aikam l'shono." He says the Meiri in his commentary to Maseches Tainus in discussing the people of Nineveh explains that normally we would exempt somebody from stealing a beam to return the beam. And he says that would have applied to the people of Nineveh as well. Shmuel Hagam. Let's see. Hagam shetakonas mereish nemer bagoyim gam kein vanshe ninve yachlu liftoris atzman b'damim ichshash chamas asu lifnim mishuras adin v'lo samchol takonas chazal. That according to the Meiri, the people of Nineveh went above and beyond the letter of the law, because they could have exempted themselves by not demolishing their structures in order to return the stolen beams that they stole, but they went above and beyond, and that's the saving grace of the people of Nineveh. Ulam b'megia ala meiri sham kasav ulai kavanas hamiri ben goy lagoy kemase ninve shetakanas chachamim nasu gam ken lagoyim yuyin sham. Right? But in any event, the conclusion seems to be, regardless that there's some question of whether this takanas meiresh applies to non-Jews as well. Okay, now let us continue. Now, he goes into a lengthy discussion here, which I'm not sure is worthwhile for us to. Okay, so why don't we go on to the next? To the
slide, this slide, never heard of that one.
No, you never heard.
Never heard of that. Never heard of that.
No.
For
For
the no laws that you're.
Okay,
So if they eat Aver Menachai, they're gonna be
if
killed.
they eat Aver Minachai, they're killed. Here, let me see if I can just show it to you in the Rambam.
So they're actually held to
To a higher
They're
standard.
held to.
I don't understand.
They're held to a higher standard when it comes to the penalty, not when it comes to the general laws. Here, just see.
but that would only be for someone who claims to be, who states they follow the apartheid laws inside Israel.
Or
If
it,
it was out- if it was
Or
outside,
under
if it was outside
location.
Israel. then-
or if there was a monarchy that. Here, let's see.
No. I have no idea, Jews living in Israel today.
Let's see.
We keep yarmulke on, which.
That's not, I think I'll stay Jewish.
Keep the yarmulke on, don't change.
Hold Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu lo hinchil haTorah v'hamitzvos elu Yisrael. So here's the source in the Rambam. I'll just put it here for the people that are watching. Moshe really only gave the Torah and mitzvahs to the Jewish people. Shenemar Morasha Kilas Yaakov, as it says that it's an inheritance for the congregation of Jacob. And anyone who would like to convert. Shenemar Kachem Kager, as it says that you shall be like the convert. Avol Mishal Ratza in Kofen also lekabel Torah mitzvahs. But if a person doesn't want to convert to Judaism, we don't compel them to accept Torah and mitzvahs. But God did command, in other words, Hashem told Moshe to coerce or compel every single human being to accept the 7 Noachide laws. Anyone, any non-Jew who does not accept the Noachide laws is put to death. And anyone who accepts it is called a righteous ger toshav. A ger toshav is the term that the Torah uses for someone who has not converted to Judaism, but abides by the Noachide laws. And in order for a non-Jew to fulfill this technically, he has to accept Noachide law in the presence of 3 Jews. But and if a person accepted to circumcised but failed to do so for 12 months, then he's kamin ha'umos. Then he's considered to be like he's a non-Jew. So in other words, he's let's see, he's not considered to be a convert. He's considered to be a righteous Gentile, but he's not a convert. Kol hamakabel sheva mitzvos v'nizar la'asosan hareza mechaside umos ha'olam. That if a person accepts the 7 Noachide laws, he's one of the righteous people of the world. V'yesh lo chelek lo'olam haba, and he has a portion in the world to come. V'hushi yekabelosan v'yasosan mipnei shetziva b'hen HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Torah. That's provided that he does them because that's what God commanded. V'hodi'anu yedei Moshe Rabbeinu shebnei Noach mikodem nitztavu b'hen. And he acknowledges that Moshe instructed the world that God had told Noach before then that this is what is binding upon all his descendants. Aval imasan mipnei hechrei hadas ein ze gertosha ve'eno mechaside umos ha'olam v'lo mechachameya. But if he just does it because of moral virtue and doesn't believe in the Torah, doesn't believe in the fact that there was a commandment by God to observe the 7 Noachide laws, then he is not considered to be a righteous Gentile, nor among their wise people. Now, this is a very controversial statement of the Rambam, and it's not agreed to by all, but that's nonetheless what the Rambam writes. So in Perek Tes, when he talks about the 7 Noachide laws in more detail, he says there are 6 commandments that God gave to Adam: Avodah Zarah, Birkas Hashem, cursing God, that's the second one. Shvichus Damim is murder. Gili Oraya, sexual crimes. Gezel is stealing. Dinim, and the obligation to enforce law within one's society. Afal pi shekulin hein kabbalah biyadenu Moshe Rabbeinu vadas notelahen michlal divrei Torah yera'eh sha'al elu nitztave. That even though they are all based on Misorah, this is part of our oral tradition, and they're logical, but it seems that from the words of the Torah themselves, you can extract that they were commanded for these. Hosif l'Noach Ever min Achai, and God added those to the 6 Noachide laws that were given to Adam. He told Noach the prohibition of Ever min Achai. Shenemar ach basar b'nafsho damo lo sochelu. As the Torah says, by tearing off a limb from a living animal, the Torah addresses that with Noach by saying, ach basar b'nafsho damo lo sochelu. You may not eat a living creature while it's still alive. Nimsu sheva mitzvahs. So it turns out there are 7 Noachide laws. V'chein haya hadavar b'chol ha'olam ad Avraham. And that's how things continued until Avraham Avinu. Ba Avraham v'nitzave yesra le'elu b'mila. That Avraham came along and he was commanded to circumcise. That was the very first additional mitzvah to the Noachide laws. V'hu hitpalel shacharis, and Avraham also, on his own volition, initiated the practice of prayer in the morning, which we call shacharis. V'yitzchak hifrish meiser v'hosef tefillah acheres lifnos hayom. Yitzchak added an additional mitzvah, which was tithing. And he also added another prayer, which is what we call mincha. V'Yaakov hosef gid hanasha v'hispalel arvis. And Yaakov instituted a third new mitzvah, which was gid hanasha, the prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve, and he instituted ma'ariv. V'mitzrayim nitztava amrav b'mitzvahs siseros. Amram was given additional mitzvahs. This is based on the midrash. Ad sheba Moshe Rabbeinu v'nishal matorah al yado. And he doesn't say, but this is based on our Mesorah in Torah Shabbat Peh, that Amram had additional mitzvahs as well.
All people Amram?
Amram, because he was the leader of the generation. He was Moshe's father. I'm not sure which additional mitzvahs he's referring to. It could be there was some.
Known as a leader?
Yeah. You didn't hear
Where are all
my,
these new things today?
you didn't hear my, you didn't hear my drasha on Shavuos? Where were you for Yizkor? Okay, anyway. I spoke about Amram on Shavuos.
Was there? I don't know. Maybe I was sleeping, sorry.
There are two places in the whole Tanakh that says Vayelech ish mi beis. Do you remember that part? There was a man who left the house. So there's two places in all of Tanakh. One is in
One's
the,
from Rus.
one is in Rus,
Right.
and one is Vayelech ish mi beis Levi. That a man left the house of Levi and he married Yocheved, and they had Moshe. So I expounded on the two of them. Okay. Now
So she's saying that there's at least 10.
You're adding all these things
That
here.
are 7 plus the.
Yeah.
that's like the
no.
other-
He's not
The
he's not saying that these are binding on Noachites. He's saying that there are the
The laws as they were,
As they develop.
as they developed. Yeah. But we don't know what the additional laws of unknown are at the moment, or identified. Does it identify it somewhere, really? What the additional laws are?
yeah, I'm sure that it is. I mean, I'm sure the commentaries discuss that.
So was this very controversial in the time of the Rambam?
I don't think it was commentary. It was controversial. But the Radbaz says lo nisbar mahim mitzvos asher nitztave b'hem. We don't know what the additional mitzvahs that were given to Amram. That's what he says. Let me see if the Kesef Mishnah says anything.
We didn't see the put to death yet. You haven't seen that.
Right. So the Rambam alluded to it in the previous chapter that he says that any Noachide who doesn't accept the Noachide laws can be put to death. But
So they have a straw, the whole thing, they're the whole thing.
Ben Noach here. Let's see what he says about Gezel. He says. Ben Noach chayev al hagezel, bein shegozel akum, bein shegozel Yisrael, that a Ben Noach is liable for stealing, whether he steals from another non-Jew or whether he steals from a Jew. Ve'echad hagozel hagonev momon hagonev nefesh. It doesn't matter whether you steal something of monetary value or whether you steal another human being, meaning kidnap. Even withholding wages from someone you owe money to for working for you, or even if you're a worker for an employer and you cheat the employer by eating when you're supposed to be working, you take an extra coffee break. Al hakol hu chayiv. That's you're liable as a ben noach for stealing. The hareu bichlal gazlan, and then you're called a gazlan. And you're also liable for stealing less than a shava pruta. Ben noach shegozel pachos mishava pruta. Uba acher v'gazla mimenu. And if a noachite steals less than a shava pruta, and another person comes along and steals it from him, Shneihem neheragim aleha, both are put to death for their act of theft. So the Rambam is working under the premise that for every one of the Noachide laws, you are put to death. Let me just see where he says it explicitly. I must have missed it.
So basically for stealing anything,
Yeah.
because I mean, less than half a pruta.
Right.
Yeah.
Does it say what type of execution they did?
I don't know.
The swara that
I don't know. I don't know offhand why that is.
Here's Svara. Better convert and steal, Chaim Malchus, you know?
I'm just don't do that.
They don't have to take.
Yeah, it's hard to collect from the dead, right?
Okay.
Well, this is generally by the earthly court.
Yeah, a Noachide could even be put to death by an earthly court. Again, if he lives within a biblical society that wishes to comport themselves according to biblical law. But he says, Benoach sheshagag, this is the next chapter, Be'echas mimitzvos potter mikli. He's going to be potter if he did it unintentionally. Chutz mirotzeach bishkaga. That's unless he kills someone accidentally. Shim hargu goel hadam eno neharag alav eno ir miklat. He says that if a person if someone wants to take vengeance upon a Noachide who killed accidentally, he has a right to do so because he has no ir miklat. But the courts do not put him to death, do not put an accidental killer to death. So that's when he unintentionally violated a law without intent. Let's say he accidentally has relations with a married woman thinking that she's his wife or that she's single. But if he thinks, he knows she's a married woman, but he thinks that it's okay to sleep with a married woman, or if he commits murder, thinking that it's acceptable to murder, then he is put to death. And that's not called a shogeg. Okay.
But the Noachide person who follows Noachide law says no access to the ir miklat, the citizen.
Right. There is no ir miklat.
For them.
There's no out.
Kavar beyarnu shekol misos ben Noach b'sayef. Every Noachide is put to death by the sword. Ela im baal eshes Yisrael anar marasa yisakel, unless he has relations with a Jewish, a married Jewish woman, then he's put to death by stoning. Okay. Okay.
The Rishonim discuss this too, or do we all really?
Yeah. Well, if the Rambam talks about it, then other Rishonim talk about it also. But it's all codified in Hilchos Melachim in the Rambam. So I'm pretty sure maybe I missed it at the end of.
So there'd been three that could adjudicate that it was a death sentence, or would it be that it had to be a Sanhedrin of 71? But what level does that apply?
The laws of courts are not as structured for Gentile courts, for Noachide courts. I don't know that they have to have a Sanhedrin of 3 or 20 or 21, 23 or 71.
To put to death. You have that whole.
You have to have a Sanhedrin of 23.
But I mean that's for Jewish law.
Right.
For Noachide,
You can have
one
three.
must.
3 yokos.
Right. Something I decided to sit with my wife and they could do.
You say paper.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. So we'll hold it here. We'll hold it here for
Take us off track there.
today. That's okay. Have a great day, everybody.